theme for June is punk. It was chosen by our Bologna chapter in Italy and illustrated by Cristina Portolano. Punk stands for challenging the status quo, making noise when silence isn't an option. It's brutally honest and the raw beauty of doing something your own way. Here to share her thoughts on today's theme is the wonderful Jacinta Parsons. Yes! Jacinta is a broadcaster, radio maker, writer and public speaker. She currently co-hosts the Friday Review with the wonderful Brian Nankervis on ABC Melbourne. Off-air, she's written 3 acclaimed books, her 2020 memoir Unseen, 2022 bestseller A Question of Age, and hot off the press, her latest book, The Wisdom of Age. An uplifting, inspiring book about the wisdom of older women and what we can learn from them. Our friends at Brunswick Bound have copies on sale here today, and Jacinta will be happy to sign them after the talk. They're just up the back. Jacinta is a sought-after public speaker and facilitator with over 15 years of experience hosting live events. She's lived with Crohn's disease for over 20 years and is an ambassador for the Crohn's and Colitis Association, speaking and writing about the impact of living with chronic illness. Brilliant, candid, and endlessly inspiring. Please join me in welcoming Jacinta Parsons.
Thank you. I think I wrote that intro. Except the candid bit. I like that very much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. Far out. It's so cold and I put on a pretty dress and I'm cold wearing it, but fuck it. I'm going to wear my dress and we're going to have a good time together. I wrote something, so I'm not going to riff. And the unfortunate predisposition of mine is I'm fairly earnest. It's a really sad outcome when you're like, God, where is the funny girl when you write? So I chose, this topic. What a fucking topic. And I feel so intimidated to even try and talk about this topic with you today. But thank you again for coming. Hope you've all got coffee. If you came in late, it's just around the corner. Nothing amazing is going to happen between now and in 20 minutes. All right, this is all about punk. Singer-songwriter Claire Bowditch began broadcasting on ABC Radio about 7 years ago. And it was the first time that she went to work in an office. Her creative life had allowed her to stay away from those sorts of hell pits until that moment. So on the eve of her first show, because I was working there with her at the time, we both sat down and we talked about how the public role would impact her. It was like a different work to that she'd done as a musician and as an actor. Broadcasting live every single day on the type of talkback show that she was hosting would mean that she'd have little room and place to hide. So we talked for hours about the complexity of exposure of the self and in a public role like the one she was about to take on. And after our long interrogation of that, we landed on one word that would help steady her ship: punk. On her very first day of broadcast, she wrote #punk on her hand. But why was that the word that we explained for both of us how she could do that job? And why did it also make sense to me to be able to do the creative and personal work of broadcasting and writing? I can imagine the image of 2 middle-aged white ladies writing punk on their hands is slightly humorous. But punk has been retained as an essential touchstone for me for my entire creative life. When I think about punk, I've evolved my definition from the images like the one we saw at the start, from the aesthetic and political origins of the 70s in the UK. Now, my punk heroes are women in their 80s and 90s, pushing against the pricks while wearing capri pants and linen shirts. I want to tell you about those women that are in this book that I've just released. But first, to the issues of public creativity, the self and the importance of the punk ethos. I've been troubled for a long time. This is all secret, by the way, although we're filming it, aren't we? I love the ABC as part of this. What a vibrant and wonderful public institution. Someone else wrote this. I've been troubled by questions of how my creative expression as a broadcaster and a writer to some extent, and how it intersects with who I am, and how much of me is required to do this work. The reality is that it's a whole lot of me, warts and all, that I present when I'm on radio. It is a performance of self, but it's a close to the authentic self and me as I think I could ever get in a public creative role and expression. The writing I do has that same requirement of exposure. I will often reveal myself and my life in my work as a way to speak about larger systemic and social issues. My first book was on the experience of my chronic illness, the second on my experience of aging, and this third one here today is on the questions I have about matriarchal wisdom within the domestic sphere. But working in radio, a job that I dreamed that I might have one day since I was 8 years old, and I would make radio shows in my bed and pretend to be interviewing Bob Hawke and doing his voice on the tape and then doing live questions. So then what a child. Doing and wanting that so much as a kid. Within, though, doing this work within a bureaucratic government organisation, which I love, is fraught. I keep losing where I am because my printer stopped working. Yeah. So the ingredients for its fraught nature are laid bare in that previous sentence. Love, creativity, bureaucracy, organisation. I've wondered a lot lately if there's any possibility that a workplace can ever meet a human, one that might love what they do, where they yearn to be met, or whether the two are fundamentally, resoundingly at odds. One is human, one is not human. The poet David Whyte has spent a career trying to find a language to express the odd match and travels the world speaking to leadership teams about the experience of being a human at work. Work is a constant conversation. It's the back and forth between what I think is me and what I think is not me. It is the edge between what the world needs of me and what I need of the world. And he says as well, what is heartbreaking and difficult about this inner self that flirted, enticed, spent time with and eventually committed to a career is that it's not a stationary entity and a movable foundation. It moves and changes and surprises as much as anything in the outer world to which it wants to commit. So falling in love with making radio and feeling an innate connection with the medium, a connection that I can't really explain often in words because I don't have very many good ones, nor do I have a science degree, but it's distinct from working in it. Creative practice, especially within the realm of media and communications, is not often a solo or independent affair. There's always an intersection with a collective, a bureaucratic, and organisational agenda. An opinion about that agenda is often in vain. The machine will move on regardless of how the cog feels about its machinations. When your role in a big organisation is to be publicly yourself, with your name and your face and your history and the stories of your private life and your emotional landscape presented daily for a public to judge, when it feels as if you take your clothes off and stand in front of a baying crowd and ask them to assess that opinion of what they see, for me there was an implicit danger when you're working for the man. Love the man. This has led me to an understanding that vulnerability and authenticity can be dangerous if there is a fundamental disconnect over purpose, which I'm not saying there is. When I began broadcasting as a breakfast co-host on a popular program, following on after a long tenure of a previous host, touch my nose, you may or may not know this, but you can Google it. The danger of this vulnerability became clear. Public hostility and personal criticism were a daily event. Hundreds of text messages were sent directly to the program and to myself and my co-host in real time every day, telling us various forms of how much we were not appreciated. These sat on a spectrum from racist and sexist abuse to just mild criticism. But mostly what connected it all was that it was personal. because the work is personal. The difficult and dangerous reality of both being the work and the worker, the subject and the object, the art and the artist, came into sharp relief. I was at a book signing just a couple of nights ago, and this woman came up to me. It was one of those mystery book nights where you get invited and you're the bloody author, and they all sit in the crowd and they don't know who the author is until they open the book, and you're like, is this going to be the most disappointing night of your life? It was for one woman who opened up the book and she saw that it was me, and she said to me at the end, she said, I really wasn't happy when I opened the book. And I was like, hi. And she said, I find you really annoying on the radio. And I said, that's funny, isn't it? Because we were talking about this person on the radio as if it was someone other than me. And it was kind of cute. I was kind of impressed that she actually said it to me rather than texted it to me. But that was such a strange experience yet again of how the personal and the public intersect in that really kind of crucial way. She ended up loving me, but I was like, babe, sometimes it's too late to fall in love. It becomes dangerous in a workplace when there's a deep and profound misunderstanding of the work that is the self. You're asked to engage your humanity, while in reality you are tasked with a job that needs to be performed and will be judged on your intrinsic self, and whether it's palatable. So the only way I've been able to survive that level of external judgment on what it feels like to be this self is to ignite the internal punk within. Anti-authoritarian is a key tenet in the punk ethos, but it's not always the machinery of the government that the punks of the 70s were fighting against that is the authority. The authority is any doubt or critique that takes you away from the centre of your practice and what it means to do it well as an authentic person. I was about to be kicked off the breakfast show. Oh, I said the show. We know what it is. And the news was going to drop the next morning, and I was anxious about that focus that it would place on myself and my co-host. And I was driving in the car with my child, who was then only 8 years old, and told him that the publicity for this next day was making me feel nervous. And without much hesitation, he said what many had tried to say to me, but had not put it quite this way. Why do you do the work you do, Mum? What makes you want to do the work? Don't let anyone make you feel different about how you feel about your work. And there it was, the 8-year-old punk in the back seat. The critics for me were the authority I needed to push against. Not because I didn't like what they had to say, but more so that the work I do can only be made when you take risks and you push against what is expected of you, to be the version of yourself that truly represents you, the version of you that is not palatable to that woman in the bookshop. And being palatable as a woman is what we've been bred to be. I remember the thrill that I felt when someone would tell me that I was a good girl. It wasn't simply that I was good, but being regarded as a girl that was good was a unique thrill of its own. I understood from a young age that as a girl, goodness would be my supreme achievement, my calling in life. But what that looked like, or how I might embody its essence, was an alchemy that took me some time to decode. I remember having a family party when I was young, and I was in the back seat of that HJ Holden, and I was being reprimanded by my parents for my behaviour. But I was mystified. I had no idea what I had done that had caused them such embarrassment. Had I run when I was not told not to? Or had I misunderstood an instruction? I sat in that back seat beside my brothers, who were finally delighted in the fact that I'd been caught. Was I a bad girl? I thought. As powerful and incentivizing as the idea of being a good girl was, the bad girl label was likely more powerful in how it encouraged me to avoid it at all costs. I would have done anything to never be thought of as bad. It felt like I might die if that ever happened. Although I wasn't very clear in those early days of what being a bad girl entailed either, but the threat was powerful enough for me to remain strictly within a narrow set of ideas of how I needed to behave. The strong memory of our family friends having a bad girl stay with them for a while. Her mother was no longer around to care for her, and her father was barely in the picture. I remember the warning that came with her before she arrived. I remember that she was a kid who had done some bad things, and I wasn't to get too close. This all horrified me. So grand was this image of the bad girl in my psyche that I was immediately scared of what she might try to make me do. What sort of badness would she get up to? Only days after her arrival, I heard she had weed on the front lawn. She'd simply pulled down her pants and weed. No one was sure why she hadn't simply gone into the house to go to the toilet, and everyone was confused and shocked. So I pretended to be shocked too. But I don't think I was shocked. I think I was afraid. Afraid of her wildness. A wildness that I understood and I felt inside me too, but that had been pushed down so far, it was frightening to recognise the ghosts of that girl was something that we both shared. What's interesting is that while I performed the good girl, I never felt like one. The mere suggestion of goodness was judged by people on the outside of me and was enough to send me into spirals of doubt and self-loathing. I'd watch adults closely to see if I'd made them happy. Had I said thank you? Had I smiled at the right time at their joke? Had I spoken sweetly enough? Had I agreed with the way they thought about the world, even if I didn't? If there was any doubt in my impact, I was sure I'd done something to catapult me into the bad girl and would lie awake at night worried about who I was and, more concerningly, who I might become. But in writing my latest book, The Wisdom of Age, I wanted to find out from the elder women I interviewed if it was true that I might be able to grow old disgracefully, as all the Hallmark cards are now suggesting we might. Was it going to be real disgrace, or just a performance of disgrace? Would I be regarded as difficult if I didn't do what was expected of me as an ageing woman? If I resisted the expectations and pushed against the pricks? What would happen? The answer from the elders was yes. Yes, I was told by many women on both radio and for this book. If you step out of line and outside our ageing female tropes, the swiftness of difficult becomes attached to your person, and it's a deliberate conjuring of the bad girl trope, remained and a powerful strategy to quell. Who would want to be considered a difficult woman after so many years of playing the game for the pleasure of others? There'd been a stirring in me since my mid-30s to stop placating the people around me. And now that I'd hit my 50s, it began to feel as if it was shaking me to get out. I wanted to break some metaphorical plates and leave them for someone else to clean up. But I'd probably help them later. From the wisdom of age, though, I spoke to artists and activists in their 70s, 80s and 90s to find out if they were comfortable being thought of as difficult, the punks of their generations. These women were not making it easy for those around them to violate rights or safety of others. They're women that join groups called the Knitting Nanas, who sit around and stop coal seam gas projects in their communities. They're sitting and they're turning up to front lines of protests, or they're simply letting their families know, I wish you didn't leave just then. It's okay. Did he feel really... I'm joking. Just wanted to make a point. Letting their families know that they were no longer going to put up with their shit. And repeatedly with every conversation, there was a glint in their eyes at the suggestion of being difficult. Difficult had become a rallying cry, a sign that they were on the right track, a sign that they had reconnected with the girl who raged inside them at the shushing she'd undergone throughout her life. Many women made a serious clarification that being difficult was not merely done for difficulty's sake. Rather, these women were finally following the beat of their heart, unmoved by the social conditioning that had held them captive for so long. Difficult didn't faze them, it emboldened them. And while the Sex Pistols screamed into the big capitalist void, I want to be anarchy, and I want to be anarchy, know what I mean? And I want to be an anarchist, I get pissed, destroy. The version of punk that I'm captivated by now is one that is not interested in destroying, because she knows that as they destroy, they rebuild it again, and often it's worse than the original. Instead, her anarchy is about refusing to be silenced, to build an alternative version of this world. One of the women in this book was talking about the experience of being an older artist. In her mid-70s, we were talking about invisibility. She's been illegally pasting up her artwork on city walls and in her regional town. Artwork that's fucking so good. Breasts drooping down to the ground, tutus, women just taking up space in their bodies. And the first time she did it, she thought, shit, this is illegal. So she went and she put a high-vis vest on. She got a mate to spot for her for the fuzz if they came along. She put out a little council thing and she started pasting up her work. And then she realised, shit, I'm an old woman. No one sees me anyway. I don't need to wear a uniform of disguise. So now she just goes out and puts it up everywhere and no one thinks twice about what she's doing. Elder women are revisiting that good girl and having their punk renaissance. They want to get back some of those years when they kept the peace and smiled nicely, and instead inviting back the girl who was clear on who she is before she was told to be something else. The girl who doesn't please those around her for the sake of pleasing, but instead loves wildly and passionately when it feels right to do so. The girl who is in touch with the voice that's been calling her whole life. The girl that might, against the horrors of the life she's been given, pull down her pants and wee on the front lawn. In radio and in writing and in my creative practice, I've been deeply influenced by these conversations with these women and about growing older. How do I push against the concepts that bind me to a version of myself that isn't full yet? This is the offer of aging, that we become full when we do push against and we find ourselves clarified. How will I take the learning about that essential, vital ethos of the punk from the elders in my life about who I might be? That's it. Thank you. Don't stop. Let's just warm our hands as if we're really clapping. We're just getting warm, but that's okay. Thank you so much.